Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ, and I'd like to welcome you today to our user share brought to you by the Phoenix Metro Local Group. We're going to be talking about Citrix Workspace Environment Management. And hold on, sorry, get my slide going here. Our format today is a presentation with live Q&A. I'd like you all to type your questions into the question area of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll keep an eye on that box and ask those during the presentation. Also, let you know our presentation is being recorded and will be posted on mycugc.org afterwards. Our member moderator today is Carl Webster. He is a CTP and a CUGC member and a very busy active community member. Would like to let Carl come on and say a few things about himself real quick.
Hey, well, most people know me by my documentation scripts. That's where I contribute a lot to the community. I'm also a senior solutions architect for Choice Solution out of Overland Park, Kansas, and Choice Solutions is really supportive of the Citrix community, and thank them for giving me the time to help with this community event.
Thank you. Our presenters today are Steve Greenberg and Hal Lange. Steve is a CTP and the leader of the Phoenix Metro Local Group, and Hal is also a busy CUGC member. And with that, I'll turn it over to you guys, Steve and Hal, to talk a little bit more about yourselves and get our presentation started.
Well, hi everyone, Steve Greenberg here. I'm out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Happy to be here today and share our experience with Workspace Environment Management. We have a lot of experience with it because it previously was a third-party product, and we'll give you that whole story. And I've got here with my friend and associate, Hal.
Hello, my name is Hal Lange. I'm with Client Computing here out of Phoenix, Arizona. Also a member of the CUGC. I've been working with this product since its inception, so
since it was a glimmer in Pierre's eye.
Yep. So I'm more than happy to share our experiences here and hopefully get you guys a good understanding.
And we have a very special guest today, which is Hal's mom, Dell. So we want to give a shout out to her, and you should be very proud of your son.
Thanks for that.
Okay, so we'll jump right in here. We're talking today about Workspace Environment Management. We gave our introductions. There's our Twitter handles. We both work together at Client Computing here in Arizona. Let's talk about the history of user environment management and try to level set a little bit. If any of you are old like Webster and I, you remember the 90s and what we call as the period of roaming profile hell. In the app integration world, it was known as DLL hell and old GPO style approaches. So profiles, user settings, user experience, user persistency in settings was pretty problematic. It got a little better in the 2000s. You want to talk about that time frame?
2000s were a little bit more stable. I wouldn't say they were better. We started introducing the hybrid profiles. A lot of custom scripting was coming out, whether it was command prompt or VB script, since that was becoming more widespread at the time. Third-party products really started to come about and try and help this area of technology. And UPM also came into effect.
Well, that's important. The third-party products really recognized a huge gap in the market that was impacting user experience, which is still a challenge today. And that's a long period. We're talking about 10 or more years, but in that time frame, Citrix acquired Cipago and created the UPM, which is a universal profile manager, kind of a general solution that solves some of the base problems, but still did not really get at the user experience. It was more of an admin helper and maybe avoiding some issues with roaming profiles.
That is a good thing to point out, is all of these solutions before were to help the admins. They weren't ever to help the users.
Yeah.
So that's a very important key to take forward here.
In the 2011-2012 timeframe, after a lot of experience with these tools, Pierre out of France, who started Norscale, and this product was then known as VUEM, consulted us and other experts, and we worked together as kind of a community team to take all those lessons and help encapsulate them in a product, which resulted in VUEM. Really is a superior approach to the problem. We're going to go into a lot of detail. And then in the last 4 years or so, this product has been widely deployed. Hal and I have deployed how many?
Well over 20,000.
Over 20,000 users. So it's not a beta thing. It's not a concept. It's out there working for hundreds of thousands of users every day. And now that company and those products are part of Citrix. So that's kind of the background of what we're talking about. So the bottom line is what matters to end users. What we find in the field as consultants, Citrix consultants, building infrastructures and doing large application delivery environments is you can build the right storage, you can build the right servers, hypervisor, network, platform, build a beautiful OS image, whether it's VDI or shared hosted, deliver it to a user, and they can have a crappy experience. And how can that be? Because what matters to them are the things that we know people say and what they complain about. They don't care about what it takes for IT to deliver things. They tend to be critical of IT, and they feel like they can't get their job done if things are slow or unresponsive.
And I've gotten many complaints from customers. They go out, they buy this brand new computer, and everything works better at home than it does at work. Yet they spend a lot more money.
And they can't understand why, because they just went to Best Buy, bought a computer, and they say it's better. And what we see when we go into customers that we haven't worked with before, almost always login times over 90 seconds, lots of key mission critical apps that are slow or unresponsive. And as Hal said, they expect a consumer level of IT. You know, back when you used a green screen when Webster was programming for mainframes. Sorry, we're all friends here. People didn't expect much, but now they buy a new iPhone or a tablet or a laptop, and they expect high graphics and fast responsiveness. So in general, what WEM, Workspace Environment Manager, formerly known as VUEM, so we're clear what we're talking about, it basically is able to give you the best user experience ever. Quick logons, responsive app times, and keeping your settings in place and making it easy for the admin. Big savings because scale goes up when you control system responsiveness. You can use the same hardware longer, and you can get the result we see in the field. In just a few months, the whole thing's paid for. But now Hal added instant ROI because the product is included in the Citrix suite, and we'll get back to that in a minute. And above all, because probably most of you are admins, not end users, it's an amazing admin experience. It can be set up quickly. Hal, speak to that.
My best things is every time you go to implement a technology like this, you go to any of the third parties, you got to do the training, you got to do the setup, you got to do the configurations. We're looking at months usually to set these things up. Even if you're dealing with just GPOs and roaming profiles, you're not looking at doing something usually in a day or two. It usually takes a good few weeks, if not months, to get this thing working. With the WEM, you're going to hear me refer to VUEM a lot. It literally has taken me on average 2 days to set up a user environment, and from soup to nuts. It's just that easy to do this kind of technology.
It's all structured, normalized data. It's all console driven. It's really outstanding. I'll tell you some more about it. So basically, this functionality has two elements: resource management, CPU, RAM, I/O for the system as a whole and users, and giving you a better way to manage, contain, and improve user settings. Generally, we mean by profiles, but the technology is a little different here.
The user settings also covers GPOs as well, so you can do GPO type scenarios with this instead of going through standard Microsoft GPOs.
So the way this does this is it's a process that's running on a server that's analyzing it in real time. It's looking at what the system is doing, what the processes are taking, what the I/O and memory looks like, and what the users are doing. And therefore, Hal, you explain that part.
So what it does is it looks at the CPU, IOPS memory that the users are actually consuming. And if you're in a multi-user environment, if one application from one user is doing an Excel query through SQL, it tends to take all the CPU that the system has. What this does is it provides kind of like the CPU fair sharing that Citrix introduced a long time ago and that Microsoft has now put in the system, but does it at a much better algorithm. So it actually does the fair sharing appropriately. It does the exact same thing with IOPS. So if antivirus kicks on, it's not killing your entire multi-user environment. And memory, we'll get into what exactly it does, but it makes sure that the application only uses the memory that it's asking for or that it needs, not what it's actually asking for. Now, we're talking about hosted shared. It does even better on a VDI or a desktop OS. Since it is a single user, a user cannot kill themselves or kill anyone else on a box. So it just makes it that much simpler.
So it's like suicide prevention. A user
Yes.
can't kill themselves. So you mentioned RAMhal, and this is one of the unique things. There have been CPU throttlers before, but this is a much broader suite that actually deals with RAM. So if you think about the behavior of Windows applications, it's typical for a developer to launch an app and map out an excessive amount of memory so that it can do what it thinks it might need to do. We're still dealing with an operating system, Windows in general, that comes from a history of having a dedicated machine, of having dedicated resource. And we know the problems that creates in shared VDI, XenApp type environments. But this process questions that, and it looks at what the application is using. Because even if the app does end up using the full gig or gig and a half that it maps at launch time, it never returns it back to the system. And this is where WEM does some incredible work at monitoring that and at an API level, returning that memory to the system. So if you're misbehaving, you're mapping a bunch of memory as a bad application, this little memory cop busts you and takes it back.
So look, to explain the graph a little bit, which we'll get more into the demo, and you'll see it actually working live.
Hey, Hal, before you do that, we have a question.
Sure, sure.
Would WEM help with memory leaks or processes running away with CPU, asked by Nathan Payne?
Getting right to the core there, Nathan.
Actually, yes. I've had one customer where this was running, and they did not even realize that they had a memory leak with their application, or another customer that didn't realize that they had a runaway process in the application because this was controlling it. The worst part about this is when you're doing it in a VM environment. Everyone monitors the VM environment to watch CPU, RAM, IOP utilization. Since this dials it back so much and makes it more of a fair sharing, you can't monitor it that way anymore. The CPU will show 100 peg to 100%, yet the users are experiencing no slowdown, no issues. They just continue to work as it does, so as they expect. So
take us through.
I want to finish the memory thing here. So yes, it does help with memory leaks and it does help with CPU consumption. When we get into the demos, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I hope that answered the question. The graph here is showing, if you take those first 4 orange bars, those are all just Internet Explorer. When you launch IE, it launches an IE process, and then it launches a process for every tab you have open. The orange bar is what IE asks for when it first launches. So it's going to ask for 100 megs, a gig, 2 gigs. It all depends on the application. The application actually does not need that amount. What it needs is just a percentage of it. It's trying to reserve it in case it needs it. So what WEM does is it actually says, you're not using all that, I'm taking it back and giving it to the system. But when the user calls for it, it's still going to give it back because it is available. So that's how it actually works, and we'll see again in the demo.
Well, take us through the CPU part of it.
Yes.
Well, one more question. You've got someone asking a follow-on to the CPU running at 100%. So if the hosts are showing at 100%, how are the customers dealing with monitoring alerts?
That's always the fun part. So with every great thing, there's a downside to it. In this case, it's a good downside because you're actually utilizing the systems completely, but you really don't know when you start to actually run out of resources. You have to monitor the user experience at this point, not so much the actual hardware. So what you're doing is you're trying to monitor response times of the application to make sure that it is not being affected at that point.
And that was for Daniel Tackett, so hopefully that answered his question.
Great, thanks, Daniel. And Hal, take us through how it works on the CPU level. Got just a good description of memory, but this is perhaps even more significant.
This is how a user, or in theory, an application is supposed to run. You launch it, it takes up all the CPU, short amount of time, users get a great experience. How it actually works in real life is you have the operating system, antivirus, all the other stuff that's going on, other applications, other users. So you have a very small amount of CPU to actually work with, and so it takes longer to open or use the application. So what the Workspace Environment Management does is it actually shares everything appropriately. So not only does the OS and the other users get what they need, but the user or the application that the user has launched also gets what it needs. So it does that by dynamically changing the priority, which we will see in the demo again, how that actually works and affects the actual applications.
It's also slightly counterintuitive because it sounds like you're clamping down and taking resources away from users, but the reality is it increases their experience, because instead of rogue processes taking everything and ruining it for everyone, backing off a bit provides plenty of resources. So actually, performance improves. It's somewhat counterintuitive. And similar benefits occur at login time. You want to take us through that explanation as well?
So this is what a login time actually looks like without WEM installed, or I got to get over the name.
It's WEM.
It is WEM. So you have the session initialization, you have it loading the user profile, GPOs, blah, 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 login scripts. You guys are, I'm sure, all familiar with how a login process is extremely long, painful, and annoying. So what it does is it does the user profile more overlapping with the session initialization. With the IOPS, CPU, and RAM optimizations, it really helps with bringing that in. The GPOs and GPPs, those are all being done from a user level now through the Workspace Environment Management system. So it's coming from a SQL database, so it speeds that up. Asynchronously, it also runs all the login scripts simultaneously. So
up to 99 separate threads, right? Instead of a serial process, right?
And then the network and print drivers also happen at the same time as the login scripts, and you see that it moves the actual user experience of when the login is completed to a much earlier time. So its network drives and printers are still being mapped just because of network communication or WAN links. It's still going to have them there and let the user interact with the system. So I hope that explains the login.
All right, you have 2 more questions.
Okay.
Actually 3 now. Okay. First question from Ray Davis. This may be an unrelevant question, but curious to know if your hardware is average, meaning disk I/O, etc., would this help for the optimization to gain as much performance? I guess that means that's, yeah.
It actually does. Again, a lot of this is counterintuitive because the operating system and the applications are highly inefficient and mostly over-aggressive. So when you tame that behavior, the same hardware can support both more users and a better experience. So an absolute yes on there. That's one of the things we meant on the early slide about extending the hardware life cycle.
Yep, since it's going to fair share all the resources, not just the CPU or not just the RAM. It's actually utilizing more of the resources simultaneously and correctly rather than the base operating system can do on its own.
Okay.
Yeah, that pretty much answered.
Okay. All right. Then from Johnny No, he has 2 questions. First question is, for the memory trimming, how does it affect system page file or even PVS write cache? Does it fill up the page file write cache?
Nope, because the application has asked for the memory. The application does not get the memory, so therefore, when it's asked for it and it's taken back, it is no longer in the page file. It's no longer paged. It's no longer being utilized by the application.
You're giving it back.
Yep.
The system has it free.
So it's not even there anymore. It's just free to the system to use however it wants. So it's not in the page file. It's not paging it out. It's just taking it back.
Okay. His second question, what about VMs that are thin provisioned versus thick provisioned disks?
It's not going to matter.
No difference.
It's still the IOP utilization that it's trying to do as far as the disk goes is the same it does on the CPU. It changes the priority on dynamically when something is asking for it. So if a antivirus, as we all know through many of the tests out there by Jim Moyle and others, antivirus and Windows work together so well that antivirus will take every IOP that the system has to offer. So if it has hundreds of thousands of IOPs because it's sitting on a flash array in the data center, it's going to take every last one of them. What this does is the same thing it does for the CPU. It changes the base priority. So what it does is if antivirus is running, it just says, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to put you on pause for a second while I let something else fly by and then give you back the resources. So it's still going to take the hundreds of thousands of IOPs that are available to it, or down to the 20 if it's a 5,400 RPM drive. It's just allowing things to access it more balanced.
Okay. All right. The next question is from Patrick. I'm sorry, Patrick. I don't want to mess up your last name. His question is, what if a logon script needs one of the map drives? which I'm assuming means a map drive from another script. So I guess, can you run the script synchronously?
You can. There is ways, if there is a need for that, you very much can. What I have found in deploying this out to many of our customers is the login scripts actually go away, and you move everything more to the GPO, GPP side of the house in the Workspace Environment Management. So if you still need login scripts, yes, you can definitely do them in order. You can do them synchronously. You can do them asynchronously. You can do it pretty much any way you feel is necessary. You can have one script call the other if you'd like. You can map the drives in the scripts or wait for it to have the network drives available. I mean, there's 1,000 ways to skin the cat. We just got to catch the cat first.
And it doesn't break any serial dependencies. It just changes the process to fundamentally parallel so that more can happen at the same time and thread out better. So Webster, we'll go forward here and come back to some more questions so we can get through a couple of the slides.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff will be covered in demo as well. So.
Okay.
So we're going to give you a couple examples of real environments just to put some reality orientation on this. So this is a state government agency that Hal in particular worked with over almost 3 years now, right?
Has it been that long?
I think it has.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it has been that long.
Yeah, actually Webster worked on that too. So they maintain a 12-second login at the time of commissioning the system, and to this day, if you log into their environment almost 3 years later, it's still 12 seconds.
Yep. The user satisfaction with IT was at an all-time low when we came in and helped.
Single digit or 12? Or?
Somewhere around that.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
People were actually looking at taking their systems to Best Buy, Geek Squad, to try and get it fixed rather than call IT. So now their satisfaction rate has gone through the roof as far as they're concerned. I know it's still not quite where they wanted to, but it's climbing. And to get the Workspace Environment Manager in place for the 500-600 users was 2 days for the total soup to nuts to get it all set up for them.
The next one we'll talk about is a large call center taking incoming calls and dispatching responses throughout the region, throughout the western U.S. They're more about 18-second login. Some of this is dependent on the environment, but they were well over 100 when they started. They've solved performance issues with apps and got a lot more users on those same servers. And as Hal said, the same 2 days from soup to nuts, install the product up and running, get the benefits that quickly. A couple more quick examples. Talk about the city government.
Yep, so I got a local city government out here that their login times were on just the plain old desktops were well over almost 2 minutes. Now they're down to about the 10-second times. They had a lot of app performance issues because their main application is Google Chrome, since they do Google Apps, Gmail, and everything else, and all their stuff is web-based. So we're talking gigs of RAM being used for each one of those instances. And now with the WEM, the Chrome is behaving very, very well. They're getting double the amount of users per Citrix server, and then, like I told you already, with the RAM for Chrome. And again, 2 days is all it takes.
Exactly.
I can't stress that enough, that it's that simple.
And the nationwide communications company using several thousand of users, we wanted to give you these real-world things because it won't always be 10 or 12-second logons. They're about 20 seconds, but that was a pretty troubled environment when we first encountered it with over 300-second login. And if I recall, GPO was 90 seconds of that.
Yes,
right?
GPO is 90-plus seconds just because of all the custom filters, WMI filters they had built into it. GPOs have been a nightmare for that company for a long time. Now with WEM, it has really streamlined the process so they no longer have to worry about it.
And in this case, 20 seconds is about the best you get because of just their requirements, things loading over the WAN, just the physics. It's not a misconfiguration or a problem.
So we're going to cover the architecture. This is an extremely complicated solution, so the architecture is going to reflect that as well.
He's making his facetious face. It's incredibly simple.
Basically, you have an admin console and a broker. It talks to SQL, and the end device talks to the broker. That's the entire architecture. The fun thing is, if the database was to go down, the broker has a cached copy of the database, so that way it can continue to function. And if the broker goes down, the end device also has a cached copy of the database, so it can continue to function as well. I have a fun little story with that. I was helping a customer do some decommissioning. This was about 1.5 years ago when it was still the Northscale product, we decommissioned 3 VMware servers, and not realizing that 2 of those hosts actually hosted the VMs for the WEM or WEM brokers, and we did not realize they were down for 8 days until we went to try and make a change. The users were never impacted. So I mean, that just tells you how resilient the end client becomes when you're doing this.
Hey, I also caught a question when I looked down about, are you saying this can eliminate GPO from Ray Davis? And that's an interesting discussion, so I figured we'll address that.
Can anything really eliminate the GPOs? The WEM product is user-based, so it can do all user-based GPO type settings right, or GPPs or anything like that. If it's machine-based that you need to do, you still need to use GPOs. This does not affect the machine in any way, shape, or form, with 2 caveats to that, one being UPM and the other being in the hardware here. Otherwise, everything else is user-based. So if you need to still run machine-based GPOs, yes, you have to use GPOs for that.
So a way to say it is it doesn't eliminate GPOs, but it can reduce them dramatically. It's not unusual for us to go into an organization and they don't even know what GPOs they have, and they'll have tens or even hundreds that are colliding, and they don't really know what the resultant is. They don't know what the impacts are. We tend to use this to clean that up, as Hal said, for the user settings. So GPOs don't go away, but they get minimized and they get used for what they're best at. And that's usually machine settings and basic configurations.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about them at login time. That's definitely the key. Steve here will cover our licensing and support because it's extremely complicated.
It's very complicated. It's free. The only caveat is enterprise and platinum customers, and you need to be under software maintenance to be eligible for it. But pretty incredible. It was previously a product you had to buy. So you've got world-class functionality just as part of your software maintenance going forward, and you can just download it from the Citrix site. I believe 7.12 is out now, and there was a version you could get with 7.11.
Yep.
So
it is a separate download that you have to find on the downloads page. It is not in with the 7.11 optional downloads.
Great. So that's pretty simple. And I wanted to get us to this point at the half hour to demo. So Hal will take us through it, see it, get your hands on it, get your eyes on it. And Webster will try to be a little bit more flexible here and take questions in about 5 minutes as we go. Let's let Hal get through the part he wants to show.
Yeah, because questions are starting to stack up here.
Yep.
Well, what I've done is I've actually logged into the old Northscale Demo Center. We still have that up and running. In fact, we're going to be running the latest version of 4.1, which was just released with the 7.12. So there's a few added features in here. To connect, you just connect into the server, and lo and behold, now here's all my my WEM administration console. So the simple fact is anything under actions is anything you would do via GPOs. So we have our applications. What this is actually shortcuts to any application you want to make on the box. We have printers. These are network printers, which we can import print servers if we'd like. Network drives, virtual drives. I mean, I can read through all of these, or you guys can see it as well. What most people end up using is things like applications, printers, network drives, the registry entries. If you want to do some fancy scripting, you can do the variables. External tasks is actually where you set up all your login scripts that you used to have. If you just want to do a one-for-one, goes directly into here. I've started playing with the file associations with some customers just to see about switching things around for different user groups. And the favorite one that I get asked for a lot that isn't as functional as people would like it to be is the user DSN. The only choice you have is this is your driver. So there's no text drivers, there's no Oracle drivers. So if you have basic SQL ones, you can do it. Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with registry entries for all your kind of DSNs, which, again, is very possible. Filters. Again, part of the GPO, when you're dealing with the WMI custom filters or how you're going to set those up. The filters here, oops, I always go into the wrong one. Since this was built by Pierre, who also made the CitrixTools.net, what you find in our filter conditions is that we have an unbelievable amount of XenApp scenarios. So you can go ahead and do XenApp Farms, the versions, zones, Zen desktops. This is very Citrix oriented. So what kind of provisioning services image we have. It is extremely simple to set up what you want to do. There's negatives as well as positives for it. There's all the other ones as well, like client IPs, system IPs, Active Directory matches. So any kind of filtering you want to do based on that condition. So let's say you want to do it from the client IP is coming from outside. So you can do the client IP address matches, or no client IP address matches is probably more correct. No client IP address match. And then you would put in your subnets here. And that would say anyone that's coming, any client IP that is from the outside, this would be applicable to. Anyone that's inside, this would not be applicable to.
And it's extremely powerful that the console and the settings know all about Citrix environments, server settings, client name, PVS, all of those attributes are built in, so you're not researching how it's done in the OS. You can basically point and click it.
The fun thing is all these were here long before Citrix bought the product. So these have been tried and true, and I've been using them for years. Assignments, extremely simple. You have your list of users or groups. You just find whatever application you want. You can either add it or remove it. So in this case, I'm going to unassign this one, so it'll disappear from the user, or I can assign it. And in the applications, we can also add wherever we want it to. And Webster, if there's any questions, let's go ahead and answer some
questions. Let's take a couple of questions now, and then we'll jump to the desktop as well and see it in action.
Okay, you have two fairly similar questions here. Let me get back to it. There was a, well, come on, things, scroll up. Can you load balance the broker? And then the next question is, what is the scalability and high availability model for the brokers?
Yes, you can very much load balance the brokers as much as you want. You can put as many as you want. Scalability is, I have the exact calculations on the other computer. I think it was 1,500 or 3,000 users, active user connections that are doing a refresh at that exact moment can be on one server. Most environments that we deal with, one server technically can handle all of the usage, but we tend to put two up just to have the load balancing, HA, fault tolerance, DR site, that kind of thing. You can put as many brokers as you want, have them reply to a single DNS name. It does rely on Kerberos, so I highly recommend doing anything in FQDN. And your SQL database is just that. It's just a database. You can do it in always on, you can do it in mirroring, you can do it in standalone. It really doesn't matter.
All right. You want another question?
Sure.
All right. Does WEM provide reporting on savings achieved versus the implemented or via the implemented optimizations, or is Nathan Payne just being lazy and needing to use his systrack to compare before and after?
Well, it's got the reporting. You could turn it off.
No, this is such a loaded question. If you would have asked me 2 months ago, I would have said yes. The reporting was being built into the new version here, and now, from what I understand, it is being moved into Director, so you will have the ability to find out exactly what applications, at least we used to. When 4.0 first came out, when it was still Norscale, the reporting was all in here. You could find out what applications and had the highest CPU or highest IOPS or what was saved from it. Since Citrix has purchased it, the talk is it's moving into Director. It has not fully been integrated yet, so I don't know when that's coming. So as of 2 months ago, the answer is yes. As of today, it is, I don't know if it's coming or not.
And I think that there is reporting and there will be reporting. We're just not sure where it's going to reside.
Exactly.
So we'll have to get back to you on that.
As of right now, the only reporting that we have in here is basically what kind of logins we've had. So since I'll just go ahead and jump into this, French. Why is it always in French? October, go back to when I did a whole lot of logins here. Synergy, when I was doing a lot of demos. Oh, I guess that was the
That
wrong
would be
one.
my question
this
then.
one.
If up at the top it shows that it's in English, why are the calendars being shown in French?
Because I'm logged into a French system.
Ah,
And when I deploy them, they are not in French. Actually, I missed it. When was Synergy? Do you guys remember when Synergy was? Was
It
it
was May.
May 10th?
I don't know.
I might have been too early.
Do the whole year.
Let's just come back to here and see what we get. Oh, you're going to make me do it. That wasn't the right one. Login trends. All right, let's just take this one back to April. And we'll let this run. Hopefully it won't take that. There we go. I got some data now. So you can see that our average login times are 5 seconds there. When we start getting into 4 logins, where was Synergy was somewhere. 2 logins, 4 logins. You can see what our average time is for the login. This is pretty much the reporting we have here at this point. Should all be right. This should have been.
And all directors reporting still applies.
Yes.
So you can look
still
at the
do
same
everything through directory.
login process.
So this is what our demo system has as far as the logins and reporting from it. So it's saying that all our users were under 10-second login times. The average was 7 in this case. Unfortunately, I can't tell you any more about the monitoring because we don't have that information.
We'll get back to you on that when we get a firm answer on how it's going to be configured. But the data's all there. It's very extensive. Another question?
all right, next question. What happens to the application when it goes to use the memory it, quote unquote, thinks it has? Is there a performance delay?
There is not, and I will show you that as soon as I get started on the demo.
It's a good segue to, let's run over to the desktop and
Yep.
see that.
So I will go ahead and get the desktop, and then we'll come back to the console here.
And while Hal's logging, I'll explain too that these aren't tricks or shims or, like the old memory DLL rebinding. They're just using basic Windows APIs. So it's all legal and it's all completely documented and working with the way the applications work. The system is always able to take memory back when it's unused. This just coaxes it to do that, and it does it in the context of watching what the users are doing and trying to do in the load they're requesting.
Yeah, this
Which
is
means
100.
it's supported.
Correct.
Yeah, it is 100% driverless. It is using straight Windows API calls, nothing else to do this kind of stuff. So here, I'm going to go ahead and launch some Internet Explorers so that way we can see exactly what kind of memory usage we're looking at. There's my Internet Explorer here.
What's happening with the sports scores today?
We'll pull those up. Now you're talking my language when you start talking sports. So we'll go to, let's see, we're on Northscale. Let's go to Citrix. We'll go to MLB just because I'm a huge baseball fan.
I knew this was coming.
You guys care about NFL? So we got a few websites here. We see our list of, let's see if we can get this a little bit higher. There we go. Just because I'm lazy and I don't like to type, I'm going to take a little snapshot here of our Internet Explorer processes, and we're going to check them out later to see what our memory usage is. So there we go. So I'm just going to minimize that for now. Oops. I need to go back to my desktop. So as far as the CPU goes, as of right now, we're going to see I launch Access, I launch Excel, I launch Word. Everything works just pretty fine. Everything's what I expect it to be. Our CPU utilization is bouncing all over the place, but it's what you'd expect for a normal
Just like
user.
your brand new computer from Best Buy, right? It's fast, it's good.
So now what I'm going to do is I have these little nasty little things. So I'm going to peg my CPU here. And you're going to see that my CPU is actually pegged. I'm not going to be able to do much. You'd expect the system to be kind of hurting. But now if I go ahead and launch my Word, my Excel, my Access, let's launch a couple words here, a couple of
And
steps.
type, show that you don't get the latency of.
If I could actually
Did I click in it?
click in the application.
So I just want to underscore what we're looking at. He just launched something with 2 threads of taking the all available CPU and launched 5 or 6 apps and is typing with no latency. Again, counterintuitive. How can your CPU be completely slammed, 100% utilized, multiple cores, and you still can work?
So all of these are working just fine. Let me copy some text here. Because we all know that Excel has trouble with scrolling. So I mean, as you can see, I'm not having any trouble with scrolling at this point. So if I start scrolling through Excel, you can see that, I don't know if you can see it through the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar here, but the scrolling is just as smooth as I would expect it for any user.
It looks kind of slow on the GoToMeeting. Yeah, not sure what's coming across, but he's scrolling with no latency at all.
As you can see, my CPU is still pegged the entire time. So what it does, the CPU, as you can see, my base priority has changed to low. Everything else, Excel is set to high, Word is set to high. So what it's doing is it's dynamically changing what hits the processor at that time. Since it's set to low, it's just letting it slide right by to be able to do the things that that application has asked for against the low process. So since CPU meter is low, it's still going to take up all the CPU that it can because it's trying to do that. But it's going to allow the other applications by. So if you look at it as the SQL query from Excel that takes an hour and a half to get that information that that user is doing, instead of blocking up the box, that can continue to work just fine. And that one PID of Excel that would be doing that SQL query is what's going to be set to low. The rest of the PIDs will still be set to normal or high, so the other Excels will continue to work.
And again, back to the Department of Counterintuitive, you would think that would limit everyone's performance, but it doesn't. It has the opposite effect. The user experience skyrockets up because when they need cycles, they get them, and they're not contending for them.
So let's see if I can do another one of these things.
Oh, you're mean. You're going to do even more?
There's 2. Here's another one. And here's another one. So I'm being really mean to the system now just to show how many I have running. I thought I had more.
Maybe it opened the same ones.
CPU, there should be 4 of them here somewhere. I got one hidden, I bet. There you are. Hello. So as you can see, these CPU eaters are fighting for the processor. They're bouncing back and forth. You have the one that's never going above 10% because I have that one actually clamped. I have one of these set to an affinity to only go to one processor. As you can see, though, I am truly destroying my system here. There is no way I'll be able to get anything back, and yet I can still come in here and do what I need to with all my applications.
And show an app launch, because that just really also shows you.
All right.
And you got a bunch of apps open, too.
Yep, let's go with access. I'll go ahead and close it, reopen it.
That's just instantaneous launch with
Close Excel.
full CPU slamming.
Make sure all my Excels are closed so we're not trying to use the same process. I'll even close all my words. Close all windows. Oops, don't save.
Let's take a few questions, Webster, because I see them pouring in.
Okay, all right. So the user gets logged on before the network drives printers get mapped, and not that the process ends faster. So it's the same that you can configure with GPO in a normal Windows user profile.
For that specific aspect, yes. It's just utilizing it. Most people don't know that that GPO setting is actually there.
Correct. All right. If WEM is pausing the antivirus to allow an app to launch or a user to log on, is that actually pausing the AV process? Meaning, would the system have a gap in protection?
It does not pause the process. That's the key there, because all it's doing is saying, hey, you're still active, you're still doing whatever you're supposed to be doing. I'm just going to let something go by. So when you're dealing with, let's say, that SQL query, we'll take that for example. Instead of taking an hour and a half, it might take an hour 40 or an hour 45 now to run the entire process, just because it's lowering the priority to let something fly by. I'm not saying that it's pausing it. It's still processing. It's just not processing at the same level of importance as the other ones. So yes, the antivirus example here is that if you're running a full system scan, it's going to let the IOPS be used by something else that needs it while it's still doing the scan. It's not going to stop the scan, not going to pause it. If it's trying to do real-time scanning, it will still do the real-time scanning because that's part of the process that needs to happen. So it's just taking the specific processes that are being the offensive ones and dialing those back while letting all the other processes and systems continue on. Antivirus has 100 different processes that are DLLs that are going at the same time to do antivirus or to do real-time protection, to do a full system scan. It's only going to do the one specific one that is being offensive.
It's also important to note that the benefit of login time isn't just the parallelization, but also the fact that the CPU, memory, and I/O optimization is applied to that as well. So when you're getting a logon storm, it's being throttled and evened out.
So just to show how difficult it is to configure that aspect, under system optimization, you turn on this checkbox and you put in whatever you want for the CPU. My suggestion is you look at your end system here, however many CPUs you have, put it at least 1% less. Because if you have 100% CPU across two processors, that means one processor is 50%. So if you have one single-threaded application that's going to just take everything up, if you set it at 50%, it's never going to change the priority. So that's why I have it down to 25, just because I also have some 4-proc systems. You enable the CPU, the intelligent CPU, and enable intelligent I/O optimizations. If you want to do some kind of priority, affinity, or CPU clamping, you can. I have only done CPU clamping once in production, and that's because we knew of an application that was causing a real headache. It was an internal app. I've never seen a production need for affinity, and I've never seen a production need for priority.
But it's there, so if you have something that you do not want throttled, you have a good business case for it, you can do it.
I've never seen anything to exclude the processes either. Memory management, just as simple or difficult, however you want to look at it. You check the box, and that's all you need to do to turn that on. Again, we can exclude processes. I have yet to see a need for it. I/O, it's already turned on the CPU management side, and yes, there are some processes that you will never exclude, but you should have in here. And it's things like Microsoft Security Essentials. So that one you set down to low just because you know that one's already coming in. Trusted Installer. Again, set it to low. And then whatever antivirus product you have, I also set to low. It's just guaranteeing that that system scan is not going to hurt the users. To show, now's a good time, I think, to show the memory aspect, because it does take some time. I have it set for 5 minutes. So if we come back over here and look at our processes, where's my snipping tool? There it is. So Internet Explorer started at 11 megs. It's now down to 2. We have the first one was at 110. It's now down to 52. This one, you can see the CPU is still using, so it's actually using all the RAM.
That's probably Major League Baseball.
Probably, might be NFL. And then the last one's down to 11 megs from the, where did my snipping tool go? From the 24. So as you can see, we have a net savings of quite a bit of RAM here.
So here's the actual, eyes on what we said early on, that the app launches and maps a bunch of memory, but the system is watching it. Did it use it? Did it need it? It takes it back.
So now if I come back and I look, let's say I'm going to the Citrix one. Yep, it's NFL that's constantly working.
Is it NFL? Okay.
So I use the Citrix one. You can see that some of these have gone up, but they haven't gone up to what those full numbers were. French. I always have trouble understanding what the French are trying to say here to me. But you could still go through. It takes the memory back just like it once, but they're not going to the same levels that they were.
And by that, Hal means we love the French.
I just don't understand their language. All right. So that is the performance aspect. We can go over the GPOs as well real quick. Let me pull up my console again. So like I was saying, as far as the applications are concerned, the assignments, if I want to assign anything new, here we'll do something really easy. Calculator, we'll put it to the desktop, and I can wait the time that it takes for the refresh to occur, or I could just come over here and manually do a refresh. Once I do the refresh, it goes through, and my calculator will show up right there. So now one of the fun things about this is if I come back over and play with calculator, let's say this is an SAP, and I'm going to be taking it out of rotation here, so that way I can do maintenance on the back-end servers. There is a maintenance mode that you can enable. So when I enable maintenance mode, and the time has passed, so the users don't have to do a refresh, I'm just forcing it to make it go a little quicker. Now we have this little yellow icon. I hope you guys can all see that on the thing. So now when I run calculator, it says it's currently in maintenance mode. So the user will know that this application is unavailable for the time being.
So the help desk ticket does not take place.
Yep. So now when it comes back into production, I just come back in, turn off maintenance mode, and then within that time frame, which is on default installation is 30 minutes, you can change it down to whatever time you want. Now the icon is available, and I can run the application. So they also have this wonderful tool. This is more like a GP result, the GUI interface of it. So this will tell you from the user perspective. Right now, I am a user on this box. I am not an admin. So it tells me everything that's applied to me as far as the systems go. What's been excluded because I don't have access to it based on filters. Here's all the environmental settings. So whether I'm dealing with roaming profiles or folder redirections or whatever I'm doing. Here's the roaming profiles and folder redirections. Here's all my user group memberships that I have for that user. And then my favorite part for troubleshooting is the logs. So you have just a generic log that you normally do. Instead of putting the application in debug mode though, you could just click that button, click the refresh, and now it is simulating the debug mode, so it's still giving you the log in a debug type situation without actually putting the app in debug mode. So now I have access to everything that I would need for troubleshooting. How are we doing on questions there, Webster?
Okay. So while you're on the group policy type stuff,
Yes.
someone asked, what about admin templates? So what if I've got like the Office admin templates and I want to put them into WEM? Can I do that?
That has actually been a sore point of mine for a few years. It has never been brought in to be able to bring in the ADM or ADMXs. This is all, unfortunately, manual, adding registry keys or applications. There is no bringing in templates, unfortunately. You can import registry keys. So if you create it on another box, you could come in and export that registry file and then import the registry file. But there is no ADM or ADMXs.
Okay. Where are the settings cached within the VDI desktop in a PVS environment?
It is in, I don't have access to show on this computer. It is in the C program files x86 Northscale agent host cache folder. It's either called WEM cache or just cache. There is actually a Microsoft SQL Compact Edition installed with the client, and it's a compact copy of the database. So if you want to, you can redirect that to a non-PVS location to its right cache location. My suggestion is not to. There's a command that you can run to pre-populate the cache into the PVS image, and that would be the way to go, because it is going to, as soon as it comes up, it's going to check in with the database and get that information.
All right, can you give me that path again so I can type it in for the answer so we have a log of it? C program files, you said?
Maybe we'll get back to you on that because you can't access it on the systems. You want to get the precise path.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can log in somewhere else and get the precise path, so we will. I'll have that going in the background here to be able to do that.
And we're coming up on the hour, guys. We're happy to stay longer and talk more, but I just wanted to say we're down to the last few minutes. So While Hal's doing that, Webster, pick out a couple more questions, and we'll let people go at the hour that need to, but we'll be happy to stay longer. There's a lot of stuff coming in.
All right, so would this replace Citrix users policy from Studio, if you wanted it to?
Good answer, Webster.
I mean, for the user settings, because
Yes.
obviously they're user settings.
And for UPM settings. So something I haven't gotten to yet is in here. This is where you configure all the different policies. Generic policies that almost every system has is, remove the run from the start menu, hide help. All these are just like the performance aspects were, the system optimizations, extremely complicated to set up. You check boxes. So you want to hide drives, you can hide specific drives. So let's say you just want to hide the Q drive, for those that are familiar with that V. Set control panel so you only see certain things. All the standard ones that you're going to do in any kind of VDI XenApp environment are already set up to be just checkboxes to turn on. Folder redirection, you can do roaming profiles in here with setting just the standard stuff, as well as folder redirection. So you can do folder redirection for all the standard locations, following the documents with pictures, music, videos, as well
All right, go back to the roaming profiles tab.
Okay.
What most people like that set Windows roaming profiles path and the RDS roaming profiles path, what a lot of people don't understand is if you go into the Active Directory users and computers console and you set like a home drive or a profile path on there, you disable logon optimization for group policies when you do that. And so by doing it in here, you're bypassing that stuff within Active Directory, and you're not affecting group policy logon optimizations. A lot of people don't realize that.
Thanks for bringing that up. And that's one of the things that it's not correct to say this is better or replaces GPO. It's just implemented so well, it makes it easier, and it fixes a lot of things like that that you don't need to know. It's a great example.
All right, so another question. If I've got something configured in a group policy and the exact same thing configured in WEM, the question is which one wins? It would be the last one that's applied would win. So which one is applied last, group policy or WEM?
Well, that's the fun thing, is when you're doing logins, WEM is actually going to apply after group policy. 90 minutes later,
wins.
90 minutes later, group policy is going to come back in and apply again. So depending
90
on
minutes plus a random offset of up to 30 minutes.
All right, so up to 120 minutes. That's the problem with having an AD guy.
Your dad's always right.
And again, we can change it to whatever we want. By default, this one is, sorry, I'm trying to find the exact spot. Here it is, 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes, this is going to reapply down to the client, but GPO is going to come in there at a certain point. So the idea is you pretty much want one or the other, or have them set the same.
Okay.
I think another thing worth pointing out is if your GPO is well managed and working and performant, you don't have to stop using it.
Correct. Yeah, if your GPO is doing well, then continue to use it. There it is, NAR-scale.
All right, guys, well, we're on the hour. We're happy to stay and hang out for a while and talk more. Here's the path that was asked about for the local cache, if you can see that, Webster.
All right,
And,
let me find that question so I can, all right, let me put that in there.
I just want to thank anybody that does need to go on the hour. Appreciate you coming. There's been an overwhelming number of questions, so we'll stay longer. We'll keep talking. Thanks for those that have to go, and for anyone that wants to stay, we'll be here for a while.
Yep. As soon as Webster's done typing there.
All right, I'm done typing.
All right, so again, we can come in here. There's the UPM settings. So anything that you would do through the Citrix Studio to turn on these policies, you can do it through here with a nice GUI, much easier to have a better understanding of what's actually going on in here. By default, it also has, nope, not that one, a file system. It has some default ones in here, so Windows XP or Windows 7. You just set that, and lo and behold, it adds a whole bunch of different ones in here.
Cool.
So these are some of the default settings that you can have just out of the get-go without ever having to do all the manual typing yourself.
That's my favorite button right there. Can you explain that?
The profile cleansing tool. None of the other tools seem to have that. You always have to write a script to go out and clean up your profile. So if you add another exclusion, no product out there is going to go out and clean up the things that are new to the exclusions. So what you can do is you actually can use this. You add a new exclusion, put in your path to your roaming profile location, hit scan, and it'll go through and find all the folders that have that, and then you hit the cleanse, and it'll clean it all out. So
this is not insignificant because we've had clients over the years that have those build up into terabytes.
And this product or this process can take many hours. I think the longest I've seen was actually about 3 days to get through the multi-terabyte profile directories. So it is not a small thing to run. It does take time, and don't get discouraged if you are running it. I mean, we didn't talk about Transform at all. It's another little utility that's in here that can turn a system into a kiosk mode. Just to give a quick example here. What it does is it gives you the ability to change this into a thin client. So you take a Windows box, install the Workspace Environment Manager on it, and then you could turn it into a thin client like this, so you only see what you want the users to see. So you can have it see local applications if you wanted to. It only has access to certain websites that you give it. So and this is the ability that you get as well with dealing with that. I'd like to see it replaced as the desktop lock, is what the rumor is at this point.
Yeah, stay tuned for that.
Yeah. Okay.
There's an interesting question here, Hal, Webster, that I just want to jump to. Has the user the possibility to choose which printers he would like to use from them given over Northscale? For example, the user receives printers, but he chooses only to use 2 of them from Roberto. And also just covering what the user can and can't do in the client.
Okay, from the client perspective, we haven't even really talked about this. We have a nice little status tray icon, which gives us interesting things that we can do. We can manage printers from here, where these are all the printers that are on this local device. You could come in, set your default, clear it out if you want to, make sure you go back to a system default, add more printers, find printers. So you can actually get rid of the the devices and printers out of your system and just give them this to manage printers at that point. So the user can choose whatever printer they want. If the policy says to map 1,000 printers, they're going to map 1,000 printers. They can go in and delete the printers they don't want, but the next time they log in, the policy says to do it. So you can set the policies to only run once. So if it maps 1,000 printers for the user, they go and clear out 998. If those printers are set to only run once, it will not reapply those. Some of the other things that you can do is you can manage the applications. So a user can take these applications that they want, and they can add the shortcut to different places or take it away. So I can update the shortcut, and you notice my shortcut disappeared from over here. Now we'll look at this one, and we'll see that's the priority. So I will be able to take that one away as well. Users can manage the shortcuts if they like with deleting or just by going through here. If they're not seeing a shortcut on their desktop and they want to, they can very easily just add it through here by checking the box. Some of the fun things that they have on here for as far as help desk goes is they have a help button, which the help button is configurable back here on in the console to determine where we want it to go. This is our help link. So we can determine to have that go any place we want. We can also add a custom link, which would show up in the client then. Instead of help, it would say support. So
if you're showing something, we're not seeing it.
You're not seeing it?
Oh, really?
Right there?
We're still back on the applications list.
Yep.
Yep.
Applications list.
I see it on the GoToMeeting, though. Any other feedback? It may be your side, Webster, because I'm monitoring the GoToMeeting. I see him moving. All right. Well, if you're not seeing it, it's a client option that lets the user go to a support site to be given a link. They can even capture their own screen and send it over to the support people.
So, do you see the screen capture now?
Yes.
Webster?
Okay.
So yeah, you were looking at the right screen because it would just say support right here instead of it have help and support. So here's the screen capture. They add their own little comments and then click send to support, and it sends it right off to the help desk. We don't have an SMTP server configured, so as you can see, it doesn't work.
So lots of nice integration for the client. Starting with the printers is a great question, but you can see that the client can get support and send screenshots. I see a question from Aaron Sharp I like, Hal. I don't know the answer, so I want to know this. Is can I apply a filter to those environment settings to only affect certain delivery groups? Or should I use separate sites for that? Great question. Is delivery group a filter?
It's a very good question.
Isn't that?
Desktop group.
Ah, yes you can, Aaron.
So there you go.
We solved that thing we talked about yesterday.
So yes, you can set filters that apply only to specific desktop groups, or you could set it up as different sites. One thing I did neglect to mention is there are separating sites here. So if you have different PVS images, you can have them point to different WEM sites, so that way they can be segregated in that manner as well. So like I would suggest having a different one for your Windows 7 versus your Zen app versus 2008 R2 versus 2012, just because some settings are inherently different across those. Next question.
All right. Do you foresee the WEM architecture being integrated into Zen desktop controllers, VDAs, the database?
Oh, good question.
I have no idea. When talking to Pierre about that, his goal is to not, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen at some point. I mean, he's one guy.
Yeah, we don't know. I would say yes, please.
I'd like certain aspects to be integrated into Studio, and I'd like it to go the other way in some things as well. I'd love to see the database structure be taken by Citrix to use the WEM side. It's much easier to deal with, much easier to maintain, much easier to import things rather than being blobs. But then there's the other aspect of having one console. We're going back, as far as the Citrix products are concerned, we're going back to having multiple consoles to do different things. I'd like to see it integrated in Studio. So I have no idea what the plan is going forward. I'm not part of Citrix, so.
Okay. All right. So does licensing allow us to use WEM on physical endpoints?
That's a great question. Historically, it did. Hal's laughing. Historically, it did because the product was delivered both to VDI, shared hosted, and to physical desktops, and we have a lot of clients that have done that. I don't believe that that option exists today to purchase it to do that, but if you're a client that has had it in the past, you can continue to use it, get support, and I think even purchase more.
If you would like to put it on your desktop client as a end device, my suggestion is talk to your Citrix rep and put a lot of pressure on them to try and get it so it becomes a desktop product, because I would love to have it back on the desktops.
Yeah, it's very powerful for the desktop OS or the server OS, regardless of how you deploy it.
And then someone's asking about CSP. Is this available with the premium SKU?
Do not know, and for anybody who doesn't know the reference, Citrix service providers have their own licensing that allows them to host environments for customers. Because it's part of Enterprise and Platinum, I would assume it's in CSP, but I don't know that from direct experience. If you are a customer of a CSP, I'd contact them and request it, and if you're a CSP, you probably have to go to your program contact.
All right. How much data is sent to and from SQL?
From the device that is the target, the one that has the agent installed, absolutely none. Everything is sent to the broker. The broker is what talks directly to SQL, so it depends on what if it's from the client perspective, there's nothing that goes directly to SQL.
Okay.
And then Justin Miller, hey Justin, is asking, I've never thought of that cache database. Is it readable to the user? We saw that you couldn't view it in your Explorer, but do you know the rights of it?
The SQL Compact Edition, I don't believe that anyone could actually access it locally. you might be able to browse to the file location, but you can't open it and take a look to see what's in there. SQL Compact Edition doesn't really, it has more security put around what can actually use it versus actually reading a database like a flat file.
Okay. And I see a question, it just popped up, about where do they find the resultant tool that you showed?
The resultant tool is actually located, that's why I put this on here today. Let me put the path out here so everyone can see it. It is in C program files x86, Northscale agent host, VUEM RSAV is actually what the product is called.
Let's make it bigger.
The other utility that you guys will want to become very familiar with, which is funny because I know it's going away, but in the current versions you need it, is the agent cache utility. This is to do the pre-population or force the cache to come down. Agent cache utility.exe. And it has a couple flags on it that you have to do. One is the refresh cache, which actually you can do just R, and then /B for the broker name, or type it out. Server. So these are the things that you want to use for the troubleshooting purposes and filling the cache as well. There's, just to throw it out there, we do have a couple of YouTube videos out as well for how to do the installation as well as turn on the performance optimizations. I am in the process of making some more videos for PVS optimizations, group policies, things like that. You'll just be able to search on YouTube for Citrix WEM and you'll be able to come up with these as well.
And we're at 15 minutes after the hour. We're good for another 10 or 15 minutes if you want to keep staying and talking. We still see 120 people logged on, so we're happy to keep going. There's a question.
On the licensing, do you have to have SA or that new software maintenance?
It is software maintenance, but software maintenance also was announced to be mandatory next year. So in the future, all support software maintenance will be the program called software maintenance, which includes the software subscription and technical support as well. So like most of the industry, the support fee is for software maintenance and technical support, and Citrix is going to that next year as well. It's an interesting question here I see from about, they have two XD sites, prod and DR.
Okay.
They use the same PVS image copied over. Servers are in different OU structure, and they have challenges applying XD controllers through registry for site. DR site gets cached, info from prod. Question is, can WEM be used to apply registry entries during server start? That's an interesting question. It's important to understand.
Workspace Environment Manager can only do settings in a user context. So at machine start, the answer would be no. At user login, the answer is yes. I've had some talks in the past with some of the, when it was still Northscale, about will this run on a SQL server, because I want those kind of performance optimizations on my SQL server. The answer has always been no. A user has to be logged in to have the agent take effect. So unfortunately for that kind of situation, it's probably not going to work. There are some other methods that you can get around with that for the separate sites. This isn't really the place to
Interesting comment from John Radcliffe. Software maintenance was renamed to Citrix Customer Success Services, which I don't know if he's kidding, but I can't tell because Citrix could rename things from the time we started this webinar till now. Yesterday, I'm pretty sure it was software maintenance, but I don't know if anyone knows for sure. But if it's not true, John, that's really funny. Webster, you want to pick out a couple of questions?
Sure. Well, there was this one question about transformers meant to make thin clients, so how would that be licensed to a physical machine? We already answered that one.
Actually, no, that, from what I'm gathering, and it's not been, is it looking at a desktop block replacement?
Yeah, talk to Citrix.
Yes. Right now, there's really nothing, but if you're going to do it as a desktop block, it's got to go to the end client. But that's The licensing aspect I know still hasn't completely worked out.
Generally, up till this time, as far as we know, something like the lockdown client would just be free, included with your license to use. We would assume that would happen in this case, but we don't have information yet.
Correct. And last I checked, which was yesterday, Norscale.com, you can still download the demo of the Norscale product, which is the 3.5.2. It is not the 4.0 version. And that does, if you want to play with it in a lab environment and don't have a Citrix server, that does run on a desktop workstation, so you can actually play with an older version of this and test it in a type scenario with 10 free user licenses as well.
Okay. And Hal, Ray Davis is asking, are there any guides to explain setting up for a first-time user? You want to show them your YouTube videos? So Hal's already put out some stuff on YouTube.
So I have a installation and the proper way of doing it. It covers the server, the broker, the SQL, as well as the client, and how to turn on the performance optimizations. I have not finished the ones, like I was saying, for the PBS optimizations or for the policy optimizations or things like that. So I am going to have videos out for those, so that way you will have easy work-throughs or step-throughs for it. Whatever you want to call them, walkthroughs. I'm having trouble speaking at this point now. Yeah, but it is very basic to understand. Once you get into the console and start playing, my average training for customers is about 2 hours, and then they never ask me another question after going through that training. So they have all the information they need. So it is a very intuitive console. So once you get in and get the installation, which is not very intuitive, once you get that all completed, play around on the console and have some fun. I mean, you could always tweet out to us, and we'll be more than happy to help in as much as we can.
Omar has an interesting question about what is the best XenApp load balancing policy if using WEM? That's an interesting question. You think about it.
Users.
Yeah, just by user level.
Probably
right?
user
Number of
and
users.
RAM, because you're still going to have RAM utilization going on, but it's not going to be the same amount that it was. It's going to recover a lot of the RAM quickly, or whatever you set your time to. So you're going to be able to fit a lot more users on the box. Yeah, I would not rely on CPU at all, even IOPS at all at this point.
And Patrick says the software maintenance will be Citrix Customer Success Services. That's awesome. Like, I don't know when that happened, but that'd be pretty recent, like since we started the webinar.
Hey, well, can I use WEM with like a XenApp 6.5 and all versions of XenApp XenDesktop 7.x?
Yes, the support is for 6.5 and 7x for XenApp and XenDesktop 7x and above. It is downloadable since the 711 bits, and you have to go through 711 to get to it. And if you have the software maintenance and you log in, you'll be able to see it. If you don't have the software maintenance when you log in, you will not be able to see it. So that's pretty much how they're working that.
Okay. Okay. Can you map printers based on user locations?
Yes. You can do it based on client type. So if I go back to the console.
Client IP range, right?
Yep, you can do it based on client IP range, client OS. Go back to my filters. OU structure. So Active Directory group match, client OS, client IP address match. So if they're coming from a specific subnet, you could say that's the filter to go with that. If they're coming from outside the network, maybe you don't want to have any printers being mapped for them. That can all be done just by choosing the right filter here.
All right, and so that also AD, security group, just all kinds of neat stuff.
As
Okay.
well as the normal assignments is based on AD group and users anyways. So to do a filter on top of that is kind of odd. To do a filter of AD groups.
All right, another licensing question. Is this per user or per user device, named user? How is it licensed?
I believe it just matches whatever you own.
Yes, it is your Citrix licensing. So if you own concurrent, it would be a concurrent model. If you own a named or device license, it would be a named device license. It just falls directly into your Citrix licensing model.
All right. Is there a database sizing guideline? Someone's asking how large a database would you expect for a 2,000 user site running XenApp 6.5 and fairly standard set of policies in WEM?
Hal's going to look something up, but I'll just respond by saying this is actually an issue in some other UEM products in the market because their databases can get very large because they store blob objects. This is pretty small, and Hal's looking something up which will tell you.
Yeah, I actually have the actual calculations for it. The answer is yes, there is a sizing guidelines. The answer is no, it is not very big at all. And it is, the reason it's not near as big as some of its competitors, it doesn't actually house any profile. So some of the competitors out there house a profile in the database, which is what causes everything to grow and get a lot of bloat. In this case,
is the sizing guidelines in the Citrix docs?
I don't know. I gave them the information, and then they asked me if it was proprietary, and I said I got it from the Northscale people. So my guess is Citrix owns the data or owns the information somewhere and just hasn't published it yet. So as far as the disk goes, it is for 1 gig for 10,000 users per year, plus 10 megs for each site in your database. So each site of these causes 10 megs inside your database. And then for 10,000 users, you're looking at 1 gig of a year's worth of history being kept, because it does keep track of what's been assigned to them, so that way you can revert those as well. So does that answers that question?
So it's either tiny or really tiny.
Yeah. As far as RAM utilization goes, it is, and this is all for the broker, mind you, the sizing. 1.5 gigs for the operating system, 1.5 gigs for SQL, plus 1 gig added more for SQL for every 1,000 users that are going to be connecting. So if you have 2,000 users, it'll be 2,000 or 2 gigs and another 3 gigs. That'd be a 5 gig is what you need for your SQL server, is if you have 2,000 users. And CPUs for the broker is 2 vCPUs plus another one for SQL. It's how many brokers. If you have 2 brokers, you need a total of 4 CPUs for your SQL server, which is good because that's what licensing gives you. If you had 4 brokers, you would still need 4 CPUs. If you get above 4 brokers, you need to start adding CPUs to the SQL server. And as far as the sizing goes on the brokers themselves, 2 CPUs by 8 gigs of RAM is more than enough for everything that I've been doing.
Okay. Does this integrate with that V5?
I mean, integrate in what way? We can definitely publish shortcuts.
That's just the question. Does it integrate with Microsoft at V5.x?
Well, it's compatible. Let's start with that. It's completely compatible, but are there any AppV specific?
So there's no AppV specific things. You publish the applications. You can publish it the same way you would publish anything else. It doesn't come in. You have to give it the actual GUID to the executable to be able to launch it. And also, as far as the profile goes, whether you're using UPM or roaming profiles, it's going to treat it the exact same way that a UPM or roaming profiles would be for AppV. So you'd have to make sure you do the proper exclusions and inclusions that are needed for those AppV applications.
Okay. Now, for the rest of the questions, because I mean, there's still quite a few unanswered questions. Can these be answered like offline and then included in the webinar notes, or included with the webinar, or what?
I believe Stephanie said there is a forum that relates to this event, and that might be the place to do it.
Absolutely. It's in the chat window. There's a link to the forum post about this webinar. And what I can do is provide the full list of questions to you guys afterwards, and you can pick out the ones you didn't answer and answer those in the forums.
Al has no plans this weekend. That's completely fine.
Yeah, I was going to say, several of these questions are repeats because I guess people got tired of not getting their questions answered, so they put them in there like 2 or 3 times. So,
All right. I was going to say,
let's try to answer them then. We're trying to get to them. So anything that's repeated and important, drop it in again. Whoever goes next gets their question.
all right, this one I think was put in there 3 times. For implementation, is there a part of WEM that analyzes for bottlenecks, i.e. network drive mapping, GPOs, etc.?
nope.
Yeah, I mean that's done by other products like ControlUp and Goliath, and I'm sure most other monitoring software out there.
Shows you what each part can take. Right?
Yeah.
Director can show you how much.
Director has a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, the WEM has absolutely none of that.
Okay.
But because it's moving towards integration with Director, that's fine. We just don't know the outcome yet. So you'd be able to look at your Director and say, oh, GPO is taking 60 seconds. Now look at your GPOs.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. How is WEM at migrating user settings from XenF 6 to 7?
I have absolutely no issues with it. In fact, I've used the same site when we're doing a migration, and it's worked flawlessly. I didn't have to make a change. Now, if you need to have a 2008 R2 and a Windows 2012 that you are bouncing back and forth, I would do separate sites because inherently profiles could be different and you could have issues. If you're doing a migration from one to the other, there's really no change.
Great question from Hal Lange. Is WEM completely separate from Citrix user policies, or can they be integrated? That's important because you're seeing a whole new console here.
Yes.
Well, they both exist. Let's establish that.
They both exist. Again, I always use the Workspace Environment Management, WEM, WEM, whatever you want to call it. I use it 100% for all my user policies. So anything that is user-based, I will not use Citrix policies. I will not use GPOs. I will not use third parties. Anything machine-based, I will use Citrix policies, GPOs, third-party products. I mean, so the answer is yes. You would use both, but only in different use cases. So machine goes one way, user goes this way.
But wouldn't there be certain things that lend themselves to maybe moving to WEM, like printer assignment or...
That's user-based.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you're saying globally.
Anything that affects the user experience, I always put in WEM, which is anything that you find in actions that are user-specific.
Although HDX settings
HDX is a
Citrix policy.
Yeah, that would stay as
still affect the users. You mean on the level of sort of a profile, Windows user session settings.
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
I knew what you meant.
Flash redirection, that policy would take place in the Citrix Studio.
Ray Davis wants you to turn the light bulb on. He's confused on the assignment area. Just don't see how it knows about the environment. Maybe missing something.
Okay, so you have your whatever site you're in. If we go to configured users, this is where we actually bring in our different user groups, whether it's domain users, demo user 3, HR, executives, you would add that group into here. Then when you go to the assignments level, once you choose the group that you want to assign to, we click on whatever we're assigning, whether it's an application, a printer, it doesn't really matter. When you click over, the first thing it asks is select your filter. So this is where you could choose what your filter was, whether it's internal network, external network, part of the Zen desktop group match, whatever you choose as your filter, by default, always true, which means it's always going to apply. In this case, it'd be salespeople on site. You click OK, it's now assigned. Once the user logs in or gets the refresh, they're going to get that information. They're going to get that new policy setting.
Okay, one guy is still on. Says, if you can, will you show how the application assignment reflects in Studio? How is it assigning the apps to the delivery group or a limit users?
This does not go into the Studio assignment at all. That is a completely separate process to do something completely different.
This is important, though, because I could see why that would be confusing right away.
So as far as this is concerned, this is assigning desktop shortcuts as far as a desktop is concerned. So
What
if
you think of as your profile.
if you've published a Windows desktop, whether it's Windows 7 or 2012, and you want to give the user experience of desktop shortcuts, start menu shortcuts, that kind of thing, that is when you use WEM. If you're wanting to do published apps, you still have to do that through Studio. That Workspace Environment Manager is not going to publish apps in that manner. Think of this as the GPO replacement, not the Studio replacement.
Okay. All right. Documentation states 5,000 users are supported. What about for large environments? Multiple WEM deployments?
No, multiple brokers.
Yeah, that's probably per broker.
That's 5,000 users per broker is what that is. And that is simultaneous connections to the broker. So just because a user's logged in does not mean they are connected to the broker at that exact moment. Kind of like AppV streaming. When you're doing your streaming, that is when you're connected to the AppV server. When you're not streaming, you're not connected to it anymore. So it frees up that ability for another user to take that information. I have a couple clients that have well over 5,000 users, and we're running it just on 2 brokers without any issues whatsoever.
Okay.
Let's do a couple more questions, Webster, and I think we'll probably need to wind down here. But I did see an interesting one here that just popped in from Stefano. Could you show how to set up a rule to load different, let's say, SAP logon.ini in a user profile based on user groups? So how do we actually take a different INI based on the group you're in?
So you go to INIs. You would create a new INI here. So test. I don't have any INIs. I don't.
It calls it SAP logon.ini. So.
Let's see if I can find an INI. There's always the Win INI. We'll just take that.
Yeah, that's fine. Oh, you're a user. You're not an admin. Just show the screen.
Right.
Don't worry about
it.
it.
So you create the INIs in here.
SAP logon.ini.
This would be SAP logon 1. You create another number 2, and so on and so forth. And you can go in and actually change different sections of the INI. So in this, if you're doing the INI file operations, each section of an INI file has different tags. So you'll be able to choose what section you want, change what value name based on user operation. Or you can have it actually just do the file system operations where it copies a new INI file in for each user before it launches. So then after you would do that, so let's take, let's see if it'll let me create something here for, see, I don't have access to it.
Well, but here you can assign an INI based on any of the filters.
Yep.
And then you can even change the contents of the INI based on the filters.
So we're going to create, this I know we have. Just pretend that these are the INIs.
Okay.
Just because I'm trying to make this a little bit.
You want to see it in the console? Yeah. Calc.
Yeah,
whatever.
All right. So we have our 2 apps, or our 2 INI files. So when we come into here, we have 2 different groups if you have it that way. In this case, this would be SAP Group 1. They would get this assigned, as always true, and then this would be SAP Group 2. And then they would get that assigned. So now SAP 1 has the SAP 1 and SAP 2 has this. So it'll always, when they log in, they will get their specific INI settings. Now if it's the same user that's getting both INI settings,
the last one wins probably.
Last one would win. I'd probably look at putting the SAP GUI type application in AppV and dynamically change the INI based on that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We're going to wind down, but I like this question a lot from Patrick again. Will WEM still run when starting a published app? So
yes.
Settings are still applied. And that's a good question. It shows understanding, so I think it's important to talk about that.
Yes. As you can see here, we have execute command agent and published apps if you want, or it'll execute the full GUI. We can always hide the agent splash screen so that way they don't show up as well in published applications. We can hide the icon in published applications. The key is, if you are doing this in a lab and you're logging in on a console type situation or Windows 7, make sure to check this enable virtual desktop compatibility. This is what enables the WEM agent to run on a console for the system. Otherwise, it is looking for a remoted into the system to run.
Great. And Elaine asked another question, which I think is worth covering. We touched on it before, but these are good questions. They're showing their understanding. Can you quickly cover a DR scenario where a site goes down and that's where the database resides?
Okay, let's go back to our architecture slide. So again, the broker has a copy of the SQL database. So if the database was to go down, all the brokers continue to work and talk just like they normally would, get the information from the end client without any issues. So if the broker goes down, the client also has a copy of that full database. So your entire infrastructure goes down, SQL, the brokers, everything. The clients continue to still function. That goes back to that 8 days story that I talked about where I took down the environment because I'm such a great admin. Nobody had any issues with anything until we tried to make a change.
Now, they won't be able to change
You
the
cannot
settings,
change
but they
settings.
will consume the settings and still apply.
Correct. So if the SQL database goes down, you cannot make any changes to the current policies that are in place. Can't create new sites. Wouldn't be able to delegate. I did forget to go over, we do have delegation as well in here. So as you can see, we have a whole bunch of things for granular access to each of these individual sites. So you can give access to pretty much a specific site, read-only, an actions manager, a report manager, a optimization manager. You can give them access to specific parts of this console so that we can share the responsibility with other people as well.
Good. And Ray, I like the way you think. So in theory, it could help with published app speed. Absolutely. It's accelerating the login for those and parallelizing them and giving you all the same benefits with published app. And my favorite question of the seminar, which we might end on, kind of like LHC? Exactly like LHC. And now that 712 is announced and out, it's back. We don't have to make fun of Citrix or get in trouble for things we say publicly. But local host cache is very important. It's built into the WEM architecture, and it's now built back into XD. So I think on that note, this is a great time to stop. And thank you all. This was an incredible interaction. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. There were just too many. Webster, good job fielding. We appreciate your input. And Hal, great job.
Yeah, I know Hal's going to take all weekend answering all the rest of the questions.
Right. You better get started now, actually.
I will do my best.
I expect it, son.
All right, well, thank you guys. I really think that was a great presentation. You guys covered a lot of ground, and there were a lot of wonderful questions, and we'll do our best to get them all in the forums. I did put a link to our survey in the chat window, and we'd love it if you would fill it out. It's short, it's anonymous, and it helps us continue to plan good content for CUGC. And with that, I'll go ahead and end today's webinar, and thank you guys again, and we'll see you all on mycugc.org in the future soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.